Yeah, man. You looking like the devil who created you. What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ozone, another edition of What's Your Story? And we have an awesome guest tonight. Genetically modified skeptic will be joining us here in just a few seconds, but just wanted to say what's up to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. And I'll do the correct YouTuber thing. If this is your first time here, you like what you see, what you hear, hit that little subscribe thing, hit the notification thing, hit all the things. Just don't do it twice. That's not nice at all. And what up, Bar? You looking like the devil who created you. I stole that from Bar, but yeah, let's get into it. There's a couple things, announcements I could make, but I'll save those for later. But as I said, genetically modified skeptics join us, and we were honored, and it was awesome to have Drew there at Better in Fort Wayne in June. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But without further ado, yeah, that thing. Let's bring on the guest. Drew, genetically modified skeptic. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here. And as I just said, thanks again for being here in Fort Wayne at the Better Conference. And before we jump into our conversation we're going to have tonight, I just wanted to with everybody here, get your thoughts on Better. What did you enjoy? What were your takeaways? What were your overall thoughts on Better?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I felt like it pulled off a very community atmosphere in the way that not a lot of conferences necessarily do. Sometimes that's because of the size, but sometimes just the way that things get presented, people are kind of like, the speakers are up on a pedestal and it can be a little bit more difficult to have that connection. But Better definitely overcame that obstacle. It felt like everybody was there on an equal playing field to just hang out with each other and I think help each other work through things. I think that you set a really good example of being open and vulnerable in a way that's difficult. I mean, I've been doing this for a little while, and it's very difficult for me to share things in the way that you were at Better and setting that example for us, And so my big takeaway from it was that if you are willing to kind of be the change that you want to see and do that work, then things do get accomplished. I think that you proved that. You're for the people that were there, that final speech that you gave, for me, was kind of the biggest highlight, the thing that I'll remember from Better. Like, Oz got up there and actually did the damn thing. I guess I could probably get up and do the damn thing too.
When you did, I was going into that. First of all, I appreciate that you have no idea how much that means to me, and to hear that from you. And I told Jena after the conference, and still to this day, my greatest takeaway was actually was in the panel discussion I had with you and Josh and Seth, and because at that point I was really struggling with just a lot of anger, and mostly to do with some of the things that I was seeing and hearing from Christians, and not even necessarily here on YouTube, but my life, my girlfriend's life, and it was like, man, this is like I'm ready to put my head into a brick wall, right?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was doing, I was also on top of that consuming, and this is one of the things that you had said and mentioned. And since the conference, I've actually, and I won't say the channels, but I apologize, but I'm sorry, but not sorry. I went and unsubscribed to a lot of the ones that I could identify were bringing more frustration and more, I guess, helping to create that more of that animosity. And you had talked about or shared, being more conscious of what we consume, and what we're putting in, because that it's going to come out, right? What you put in is going to come out. And since then, I could tell you it's made a huge difference in my personal life, my day-to-day life, because there's less of that anxiety and that animosity, and it's directly impacted our content, because now it's not so in your face, fuck you type, approach. So I appreciate that. And yeah, that was a pivotal period of that conference for me. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad to, have made any kind of impact. I mean, I think that when we get into a space that really feels like our own, where we're safe to express ourselves, we have a lot of anger built up from our experiences. And like I tried to emphasize when I was up on that panel, the anger that we feel is justified. It's valid. I mean, like there are reasons why we're angry. We're not just angry because atheists are angry people inherently. It's that we've experienced things that, I mean, I'll leave it to you to share, but the things that you talked about, that Jena talked about, yeah, I'd be like incredibly furious if that happened to me. I've had things similar to that happen to me, and it just lived with me in my brain. It just doesn't go away easily. There's something you have to do to work through that. We can get into spaces where we feel comfortable to express that anger, and it's okay that we vent it. But then sometimes it just gets in this cycle to where, okay, I vent my frustration, and this person's like, I see you. And we're like, yes, that feels good to be seen. And that person throws their anger our way, and we're like, I see you. It feels good to be seen. But then we get in this cycle of doing that over and over and over. And while expressing that anger and seeing someone for, seeing their experiences, that is an absolutely crucial first step. It just can't be the whole thing.
Yeah.
We've got to progress beyond that. We've got to use that anger in order to do something beyond just expressing the anger, doing something about it. Sometimes that means like making something that's like a kind of controversial or confrontational piece of content. Sometimes that just needs to be done. But a lot of the time when we're getting on here, like every day, when we're doing lots of shows, we're trying to build a community, that doesn't look like doing that every single time. It looks like doing something different. And sometimes that even means, like, I feel like for me, a big role that I have is trying to influence people to realize that anger is valid, but then still, despite the experience or because of the experience, realize how important expressing these ideas with compassion, empathy, and patience actually is.
Yeah. Agreed, and that's the spiral that, and I try to be as transparent and like you said, vulnerable as I can, whether it's there just day to day, week to week here on our channel. And I know that's something I value about our platform and those that are here all the time, is we wear that on our sleeve. That's kind of one of the things, or the part of the niche of our channel is we it just is what it is. Our moniker is Atheist Your Way. We're you don't have to fit in, be you, and
Yeah.
when you've been through, like you said, you've been through some of the stuff that was Jena, myself, and there's one of the gentlemen in the chat, Aaron, while he was at, was it last week or the week before, he did one of these episodes, What's Your Story? And while he was at Better, he got outed to his family while he wasn't even at home, so it's stuff like that, where, to just affirm what you were saying, that there are times and reasons to be upset and angry, It's, do we allow ourselves to go into that spiral where it's just repetitive and we're feeding more toxicity with more toxicity? And I can say that's exactly where I found myself. Right, it's exactly where I found myself, and I'm proud of myself, and I'm happy to say that I feel like I've done a very good job of correcting that and addressing it. And again, I hate people feeling like I'm blowing smoke up somebody's ass, but I do. I truly value that, and I appreciate that. You have no idea what that meant for me and for our channel. So thank you.
Hey, I mean, like right back at you. I appreciate that I mean, I know that you felt like you were in that spiral, and maybe you were in that spiral, but amidst that spiral, you still did plan better.
That's true.
You did something productive with it. Like you might have thought like more, you might have been more in the headspace of, we're going to get in here and like, we're going to be able to vent, and we're going to be able to like talk about this shit that makes me mad. But at the end of the day, like, it was what it was, regardless of that. And what it was not just us venting our frustrations. It was trying to come together and do something constructive about it. If only that was just validating each other and realizing like, hey, if you need help, now you have my phone number, like reach out to me. Like, we're friends on Facebook now. If you need to talk, let me know, that kind of thing. Like, better accomplish that and more.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm proud of everybody that, grateful for the speakers and everybody was there, and proud of everybody that was attending, because like you said, the community aspect was ginormous, and we received so much feedback just on the amount of cohesiveness, so to speak, that it helped to build with those there. So yeah, big ups to everybody that was there. Everybody played a part in that. Well, let's get into the let's get in the meat here, into the conversation. And again, thank you for being here, Drew. And as I shared backstage, I only come with one pre-planned question on this, just to get everything started, and we'll take it from there. And that is, just open up, tell us what life looked like for Lil Drew growing up. What as far as day-to-day life, church, family, what did that look like?
So the thing that I should start with is that my great-grandfather was a missionary. My grandfather was a missionary. My dad was a missionary. My dad did leave the mission field when my older sister, or around the time my older sister was born, because the mission field was not, where they were, was not a particularly safe, like physically safe place to raise children. And so they got out of there. But I am the first in 4 generations not to be a Christian missionary. I mean, some people will call me like an atheist missionary, and I'm not really trying to convert people. So I guess that's not or not accurate in that way. But in trying to minister to atheists, sure, like whatever, if you want to call me an atheist missionary in that way, I do take after my parents. Like, I did go into the ministry in a way. But with that background, you can imagine that my entire world, it's not that the world had to be curated in a certain way to take me out of the kind of non-Christian worldly environment that like most kids grow up in. It just, all of my family, especially on my dad's side, were just very thoroughly Christian. They did not have life experiences outside of that. I did not know people who had life experiences outside of what we would now call evangelical Christianity until I got into college and I met people from other countries. And so what that meant is that there just was no question of whether or not this specific independent fundamental Baptist way of seeing the world was true. I mean, my parents didn't have to force me to believe anything. It's just, this was reality, and I never saw anyone questioning it at all. So why would I question it at all? So I was either homeschooled or at a homeschool co-op, which is basically a bunch of mothers getting together to teach classes. And I went to, I think, the largest homeschool co-op in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's something like 100 students, I want to say, that went to this thing. And a couple of my teachers actually had teaching degrees, including my mom. And so, it was, some of the education that I got there was pretty much what it would be at a public school, or some occasionally, like very occasionally, be slightly better. But for the most part, I mean, it was like a Becca and Bob Jones curriculums. Those are fundamentalist Christian curriculums made by schools where like interracial dating wasn't even legal until like 2001, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So very, very conservative fundamentalist stuff. I was taught that the earth was 6,000 years old, and that the earth was made, or that everything was made in precisely 7 days. The Bible is entirely literal, that it's all perfectly divinely inspired, there's no errors, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, like there was no reason to doubt that because everyone believed that. So why would you? I mean, this like Genesis is the same thing as like a science textbook. Like why are you digging into that to see if there's holes or something? You don't do that to your science textbook. So I bought all of that, and I was very fervent about the creationist part of it, especially because I was taught that kind of actually a similar doctrine to what a lot of Muslims are taught. And that is that the Bible contains what you'd call scientific miracles. Now that's usually a Muslim apologetics term, not a Christian one, but that is it's the exact same thing. And that's basically, there are things that exist within the text that we could not have known without either divine inspiration or modern science. The reason why we know these things now, like the idea that there was a global flood, and this is where all of the diversity of like rock formations around the world come from, that we know that now because we have science. We know the flood was real because we have science. And so like these things were written back then, sometimes not by eyewitnesses. So the only way they could have possibly known that this happened is if it was handed down by God himself. I don't actually think that that's like, it's not super convincing, but I don't think that it's a logically invalid or logically inconsistent argument. It's just that, no, that science, it's not science to say that the earth was made in 6 days, or that the flood really happened, or that languages all came from the Tower of Babel. And like, no, none of those things can be backed up. But I was taught by my parents and the curriculums they adopted that said, hey, such and such scientist at such and such Christian institution says that they can scientifically prove such and such thing happened, and that confirms the Bible. Like confirms that the Bible is inerrant and it must have been divinely inspired. So yeah, that was kind of my reasoning for thinking, as I got older and really started thinking about it for myself, that's why, yeah, the Bible must have been divinely inspired, is because we see these scientific miracles in it. Well, then I get to college and I go to a Christian university, and I was talking to someone at the skate park yesterday about Christian universities in Texas, and they named one Texas Christian University, and it's in Fort Worth. And I was like, no, that's not a real Christian university according to the Christian university I went to, because the girls there will bust it down, but for God. Like basically, it's like, that's what it was like. It's like they drink alcohol, they dance. Some of their students even have sex. They're not real Christians, and they don't. Did you know that people don't get kicked off of campus for drinking beer when they go to their parents' house for the holidays?
What?
That's not a real Christian university. So anyway, I went to a real Christian university where we didn't take no shit about any of that. Not at all. You got me riled up here, Oz.
I have that effect. I apologize.
But so throughout my university education, some ideas changed. I ended up thinking, young earth creationism is not really tenable, but there are other scientific miracles in the Bible that make me think that it's still divinely inspired. So I'm still a Christian. I just don't really know how things were created exactly. I don't think that like Genesis is 100% literal. It's just mostly literal. And I think it was my last semester in college that I started wrestling with the idea that, maybe evolution is actually real. And by that point, I had gone through classes that had taught me basically the philosophical and structural foundations of the scientific method. I could look at evidence that was presented in peer-reviewed journals for things like evolution and decide for myself whether or not the methods were rigorous enough to support the conclusion of the paper. And I started doing that. And I ended up agreeing with the conclusions of these papers that I was reading. And I was like, God, well, I mean, I was taught this stuff by Christians. I was taught these scientific research methods by Christians. And I don't think it was anti-Christian for me to adopt them. So what do I do now? So I ended up kind of accepting evolution as a thing and thinking, well, that seems to be, it's not that it contradicts every interpretation of the Bible. You can reinterpret the Bible to like agree with evolution. Like, you know, people do it all the time. Most Christians believe in evolution, whatever. But I started realizing that maybe God wasn't a very necessary hypothesis for explaining where things came from, or at least it just didn't really add any explanatory detail or power. It didn't do anything. It was just evolution happened. We don't really know what happened as far as abiogenesis, but it's theoretically possible. We don't really know exactly where the universe came from, but we can trace it back to a certain point with the Big Bang. And oh, also God exists, and he was there during all that.
Of course.
And I'm like, well, when you're building a scientific model, you don't just tack on random shit to it. You don't. You keep it as simple as possible to explain as much as possible. If something's unnecessary, you take it out because it's just unnecessary assumptions. So I was like, oh, I don't really know if there's a very good logical case for God when it comes to like from a scientific standpoint. And eventually I got to things like the problem of evil. I won't go through all of it. Like I've talked about it more in detail in videos, but I started to think that it was unfair or inconsistent of God to make certain sins like homosexuality basically completely unbreakable. Like there is no way. I mean, it's been scientifically quite well evidenced that there's no way to stop being gay. And that if you just decide to be celibate for the rest of your life, even a religious community that praises you for it, you will not be as mentally healthy, most likely, as someone who just like has relationships the way that their orientation predisposes them to have relationships, as long as they're supported by other people. So I ended up basically thinking it makes no sense that God designed this very uneven system of sin where some people are, they're not only, it's not that they'll be damned to like burn in hell if they are this way, but more like they'll be damned here on earth. If you were created with same-sex attraction, there's no way for you to break it, and there's no way for you to live a life that is as consistently fulfilling as people who are sinning. Then like God has damned you to an unfair and less happy life than other people. And I didn't think that fit very well with God's supposed perfect moral nature. So it took me into questions of like, oh, well, I was always taught that if you had questions like that, where it seemed like, you know, reason or logic overcame the idea that, you know, God was consistent or whatever. If there was a logical argument against something that God did or God's nature, then you should just throw it out and say, you know what, God's ways and God's mind are higher than mine. So if there's stuff I don't understand, I should just be like, oh, well. And I mean, I got to the point where I realized, all this stuff, the curriculum, the way that I was taught about morality, the apologetics I was taught, all of these things are carefully designed bits of like social technology that are meant to keep you in and keep you from questioning. There's no reason to believe them other than, oh, okay, that allows me to be in the religious community I want to be in. They don't serve any explanatory purpose. They're just random bits that you tack onto your belief system that allow you to feel comfortable in being a part of that community. So I ended up realizing that essentially what I was raised in was a multi-generational cult. like this, whether it came about from culture or whether it came about because of the controlling authoritarian patriarchs on, one side of my family, those missionaries, I was living in a way that was designed to brainwash me into not questioning anything ever and always obeying everything that this ideology said and that the people who are in charge said. And it was not a quick process, really. I mean, it's quicker than some people's. I think that at a certain point, I realized and I said out loud to myself, like, I have a lot of these questions and I don't know what to do. I don't really know whether or not I would call myself a Christian. I need to figure this out. And I took a 4-month hiatus from like anything that I thought could influence me. So I didn't consume any media. I didn't, and that was like really hard. I barely even went on social media. And all I did was like go hiking and play Frisbee golf and like maybe sometimes play video games that had no religious themes in any way. And I would not even speak to my friends about any of this stuff. It was like, I need to reason this stuff out. Right. And I'll look something up if I absolutely need to. But for the most part, it was kind of a blackout. At the end of that blackout, I was like, I think the questions that I've come up with are kind of insurmountable for what I've been taught. So now I'm going to read a bunch of these Christian books, figure out this Christian, like if there's any way that I can overcome this, that I can get back into Christianity. Because right now I feel like I'm about to step out of it. I read a few books, the main one being Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, which is the #1 that people, after I became an atheist, told me to read. And I was like, wow, this is really bad. Yeah. Like, these are terrible. And the fact that these were lauded as these just groundbreaking, insurmountable pieces of logical proof for God's existence and Christian supremacy is nothing but a byproduct of the kind of cult saying, hey, this is really good and convincing that I'm right. Not that it was actually like some rigorous thing that should convince you. It was just, those Mere Christianity got really popular and C.S. Lewis got really popular not because he was actually good at arguing, but because he was a very good speaker and he said the things that Christians really wanted to hear, like Christians are right. And so I ended up just very quietly, really, and no one knew, but just myself stepping out of Christianity. And I haven't gone back. My ideas about plenty of different things have changed definitely since then, but I have not called myself a Christian since then. And there's a whole other story of what it's like. I'm sure it's 2 separate things to go through the process of becoming an atheist and then telling people in your former Christian community that you are an atheist. It's a totally different thing. So I'll stop that piece of the story there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it because there's a couple things I want to go back and kind of dive into. So first of all, just so we're all clear, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's fair to say that you were born into and indoctrinated into Christianity. Is that
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as was I, because there's something you said, but I wanted to pull up this comment real quick, just because I thought it was hilarious, because I didn't notice it till they pointed it out. What up, Captain Dadpool? Both Oz and GM have a corner behind them. I feel like that doesn't happen. We have been cornered.
That's how the pros do it. What can I say?
Because I wouldn't even notice that until they pointed that out. But so that's an interesting similarity we have is I have a lineage, what do you even call it, of pastors, ministers, music pastors, youth pastors, yada yada yada, all down my family. My little brother pastors like a 700 or 800 member church right here in Fort Wayne where I live. So I am in my family life, like yourself, completely surrounded by that. So it makes for interesting birthdays and holidays. Well, it did up until last year, as I shared it at Better. I really don't have a relationship or any activity with any of them now, but up until then it did. But I always like to ask the question for those of us that were literally like born into it. When our mother gave birth to us, we were born into this life, this lifestyle, this worldview. Do you ever remember a time where you, before you ever questioned or there was any type of deconstruction or anything like that, do you remember ever actually like making a decision for Christ? Because, you know, in the evangelical world, that's like one of the
Right.
key phrases, making a choice for Christ, you know, choosing Christ. Do you ever remember having that moment or making
Yes.
a choice?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I was 3 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that can it's like, yeah, the experience is really important, and I think that one of the reasons I remember that is because I have talked about it so many times. You know, my family's referenced it so many times, and it's kind of like it had to stick with me. But so I started reading when I was 3. I like my mom would read books to me, and I kind of started reading on my own a little bit before I was 4, and that was kind of seen as like, okay, you're old enough to start having these conversations, or at least like explicitly being like, you might need to make a decision about this. And so a family member basically led me through just kind of the typical like, oh, there's heaven and hell, and Jesus did this for you, and if you accept Jesus like free gift of salvation, then you know. And I was, you know, I'm 3, I'm hearing, oh my God, I'm going to like go to a. I don't know if they told me if it was like a pit of fire or something. They're just like, this is a bad place. And I'm like, I don't want to go to the bad place. That's not good. And I want to go to the good place. And you're telling me that like mom and dad and like grandma and grandpa are already there. And my dogs that like my dog that died last year is there and like all this good stuff. So that sounds like a pretty good deal. And of course, like people will say, "Oh, you just believed because you were afraid of hell." It's like, yeah, that's a really big part of it. That's a big part of it for pretty much everyone. If you are actually being honest, like that is a huge thing for most people. Most people in my family, especially the missionaries, are very motivated by the fact that they think that you literally have your flesh melted off for all of eternity if you don't say these certain words or believe this certain thing. So yeah, like I believed that, but there was also just I trusted what my family member had to say about it. And my family member had made that decision. My entire family had made that decision. So it's, I mean, yeah, it was my decision, but like, why would I ever differ from them? I would only differ from them if I just wanted torture and if I wanted to be different. And it wasn't the hill I was going to die on as a 3-year-old. So of course, yeah, I'll get in there. I'll do that with them. I'll believe that with them. And I remember believing that my entire childhood. I mean, I think that some people are like, yeah, like I thought about it, but it didn't really sink in until I was like a teenager. And when I was a kid, um, it was always weird to me when people were like, "Oh, it took me until I was 13 to like really make the decision for myself." And I'm like, "It took you until you were 13 to realize that the stuff that you are hearing 3 times a week, going to church 3 times a week as I did, and then every single night when your dad is leading devotionals in your house might be something to pay attention to?"
Yeah.
Really? Like it, and you know, people have different influences than I did. They had different environments. So of course it would be different. But as a kid, I'm like, why would it take you so long to figure this stuff out? Like, why does it take you so long to figure out that you might want to put shoes on when you're walking outside and it's 105, like here in Texas? Like, you're going to burn your feet, put your damn shoes on. That's how simple it was. And yeah, so I do remember making that decision. However, there were like the classic rededication
Oh,
of
absolutely.
your life. There were decisions like that. One of them being at church camp when I was 14.
Oh,
That
church camp.
everybody does that.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah. And there was a pretty big one when I was 18, and I made a whole video about that. It was this very deep spiritual experience that I had, and I even like wrote music about it, and it's in that video. But yeah, I had experiences that were me being in touch with God or something in some way after that experience. So it wasn't like I made that decision, and then it was just like that was it. That was a wrap. No, it was a consistently reaffirmed thing after that.
Yeah, I think I'm still rededicating my life at this point. I rededicated so many times, but real quick again, thank you, Drew, for being here. I just want to take a minute, say what's up, everybody in the chat. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening. And you better know who Genetically Modified Skeptic is. If you don't know, you may have been living under a rock, but if you haven't, the link's been put in the chat. Go, please subscribe. Check out it's kind of amazing content. One of, if not my favorite video of yours, I'm gonna get to here in a few minutes, because it's kind of the crux of one of my favorite conversations to have, because my mom was a praise and worship pastor. But we'll get to that in a minute. I do want to ask, following up on that, the indoctrination, the choice, and like for me, I don't other than the rededications, I don't remember the first time ever saying I accept Jesus, right? I want to do this. That's why I like asking that question, because it literally I feel like I was just like literally thrown into it. Like, you are a Christian by default, you know.
Yeah.
But this is I've never asked this question before, but as you were talking, it made me, I was kind of going through my childhood. Did you guys have a bedtime prayer growing up?
We didn't. We had certain prayers that were like specific things that we might have said growing up, but we didn't have a specific bedtime prayer. We did have a fear prayer, and it was usually lifted largely from reading from Psalms. God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of peace and sound mind, like that kind of thing. Although my family was very big on being like, okay, we like to say these words, but these words do not make you a Christian. Like, believing these things and having a relationship with Jesus Christ, actually speaking to him, that's like what makes you a Christian, not saying these magic words that, but yeah, we had like pretty formulaic prayers that we said, not a specific bedtime one though.
That's interesting. Because most of the fundamental evangelical charismatic folks I either grew up with or that I've talked to here online had something similar to the "Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep," yada 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 yada.
Yeah.
So that's just we had a prayer. Shit, we had a morning prayer, we had a lunchtime prayer, we had we was a praying ass family.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, you had to constantly be in a spirit of prayer. Right. Is that something that you guys said?
Yes, one of my mom's favorite books was the author's name just left my mind, but Can You Not Tarry 1 hour or 4 hours or whatever Christ said in the garden to the disciples, and that was shoved down our throat. Like, you must always be in a spirit of prayer and connection and asking God. And don't even get me started on speaking on tongues, because that's a whole nother kit and caboodle. But but you talked about the process of going to school, and now there's a lot more you're presenting a lot more evidentially based claims, right? And there's more evidence. There's better reasons, or even more reasons to think, okay, maybe this is more true, and this is now becoming less reliable. And then, eventually, obviously, you're an outspoken atheist. Now, when I think about that process where emotions, and this is how I define it. Maybe you can word this better, but when emotions come in direct conflict with facts, and when feelings have to go face to face with evidence and facts, I know what that did to me, and I know how, and one part of my life, it shattered everything, but in other area of my life, it made me the best version of myself that I've ever been. Right? What was that like for you? Because that's a weird, awkward time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I definitely resonate with that. I think for me, I have to clarify that I have always been like, my mom always said I was like scientifically minded. I always liked school. I always liked reading. Science was like my favorite thing. Um, and so I thought that I had factual reasons, like great evidence to believe this stuff, like I was explaining with the scientific miracles. It's like this logical case that is predicated on a belief in science. Um, that said, when I realized that those weren't good arguments, that's when the emotions come up. That's when you realize, maybe one of the reasons why I wasn't thinking about that argument as deeply as maybe I should have, and reaching out to people who disagree to see if they're correct is, or if they have like good counters to my ideas or whatever, see if I am wrong about anything. The reason you're not reaching out and doing that, or really that interested in that, is ultimately because, yeah, your feelings is kind of what you're resting on here. I was taught that there was no reason like to exist if this specific version of Christianity wasn't true, and that truth, logic, morality, science, everything was just completely predicated on this specific belief in this specific God. And so if you throw that out, then like all life is completely absurd and there's no point to anything in any way whatsoever. So like, yeah, you have a strong emotional reason to hold on to all of that. For me, I think the thing that hit me when I realized I'm going to have to fight if I really want to figure this out, like from an evidential standpoint for real this time, I'm going to have to stare down my own feelings, like choke that down and keep exploring, even if it makes me uncomfortable. The thing that really hit me there is that, like, okay, I know that I can do that, but anytime I've been afraid or just like scared like that, had some existential threat that I was worried about, I could always just go like to my mom and just like we would read Proverbs together to help me get through it.
Oh my
And I was like, all my coping skills, all my community for dealing with the negative emotions that I'm dealing with now are gone because they're all predicated on like faith in this. All of my friendships, all my family, our relationships are based on our agreement on this thing. And so if I go to them and be like, hey, I'm feeling really alone and scared right now, they're I mean, I'm lucky in the way that my parents would not disown me. And that's actually somewhat of a rare thing. Well, I felt like it was a rare enough thing to where I felt very privileged, and that's one of the reasons I started my channel, is because I knew that I could talk about this stuff without my parents disowning me, and so I felt like I should for those who can't. But, I mean, I couldn't have a conversation with them about that, that's for sure. I couldn't say, "I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. Can you, like, hold my hand as I walk through this, as I try to figure this out and just learn?" They'd be like, well, don't try to walk through this and learn. Just come right back and it'll make you feel better. What are you talking about? And if you don't, I'm going to be horribly angry at you.
Mhm.
And I'm going to like pressure you at every single instance I possibly can to not be rational, to not be logical, to just come back. And so I think that for me, that moment when I really realized that my feelings and like facts were in conflict, I just felt very profoundly alone.
Yep.
And there's this really pivotal experience. I didn't realize it. I don't know if I realized it at the time, but now it's kind of the pivotal experience I think that underlies my entire career. Is just I was in my apartment while my like very Christian wife is like off at work, and I've been pacing around and around and around trying to think through all this stuff. And when that realization really finally hit me, I start feeling alone, and I was just laying on my back on the hardwood floor for like an hour. Just I felt like I didn't even blink. I was just so catatonic, being like, there's no way forward. There's nothing that I can possibly do.
Yep.
And that that was the moment. I talked about this like a little bit here and there, but that was the moment that I was the closest I have ever come to suicide myself.
Mm.
And I mean, like, I had, I'd had thoughts like that before because like most people do, but that was the first time I really ever had a plan and was like, I'm going to get up and do it right now. And I was trained in psychology. I was studying to be a counselor. And so I was like, the thing that you do when someone's doing that is literally remove them from the physical location where they are and get them out of, like, that is the first step to like getting them out of that headspace, is you remove that context. If they're inside, take them outside.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I was like, if I stay in this room anymore, I'm not going to live. And so I remember feeling like it was the hardest I had ever worked to get up in my entire life. I get up off the floor and go outside and like lay on my back in the grass in my apartment and thinking, I don't care if anybody sees me. Like, this is horrible. And that is where I realized, like, I need to at least test the waters and see whether or not there is a way forward before I conclude that there's not. And if there is a way forward, I don't want anyone to ever experience what I'm experiencing right now.
Absolutely.
And like, you've been there, I know that you have been there. And I think that's why what you have talked about has resonated so deeply with me, because I saw myself in that. And so, I mean, the rest is kind of history. I mean, I've talked about it. Like, I ended up telling my wife like a little bit later, like a week later or something. And slowly I told, various people over time, and it did get better. I found a group that was like 45 minutes away from my town where I could go and at least like once a month have dinner with people who didn't care if I was Christian or not, and just ask them questions. And just that little bit, I was like, oh, I think I might actually want to live. like just going to dinner with people made all the difference. Just knowing that there were other people that were around that were going through something similar, that had gone through something similar like 10, 20 years ago. That was enough to like give me that motivation to keep pushing forward. And eventually, once I had like told my parents, while it really sucked and I was in a really hard position, I realized, like, okay, I really don't want people to ever be where I was at. So I need to vent about this stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do it, And I think it's like I was saying, I think that you and I have been in that same spot, and that what you do is driven by that. And like, for me, it's driven by that too.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you. I appreciate your transparency and being vulnerable there, because those are not ever the easiest things to talk about or discuss, or to put ourselves out there, because that shit sucks. I mean, it fucking sucks, right? And this isn't what is Oz's story. This is what's your story. But I want to share this one just for relatability and for those listening, because one thing you were talking about was there is a part of that journey, so to speak, if I speak Christianese here, that is uncomfortable, and I don't even know if that's the right word for it, but it's so uncomfortable. You feel so out of your element. You feel like you're not wearing your own shoes, your own clothes. Like everything just feels different, right? And one of the titles of a monthly stream we do here on TANG is becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, and it's meant to encourage that when you make these decisions that are life-changing, life-altering, worldview altering, however you want to define that, Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. What are we doing to be better? And I don't mean any pun there, but and I'm not even just talking about the community. What is Drew doing? What is Oz doing? What is this person? What are we doing individually to be a better version of ourselves today than we were yesterday? And a lot of times it is that am I forcing myself or challenging myself anyway to get outside of that comfort zone and get outside of that box or that bubble that I've always known. And you sharing that, it brought back all the memories, because quickly through my deconstruction and deconversion process, not only was I now realizing that this God character that I was told was my best friend was always going to be there, that there's no good reason to believe that he's there, he's going to do anything for me. But simultaneously, at the same time, I was going through a divorce after 16 years of marriage. I lost my family, I lost my home. Like, I was losing everything at once. And you talk about having to redefine or recreate yourself or whatever the fuck. I remember for me, that exact same night where what you're talking about. And I can say I'm fortunate to be here, because I can't remember how much I drank, but I took an entire bottle of pain pills, and I passed out. And one of my friends at the time came to the apartment, and probably because I passed out because of all the alcohol and pills, my pistol was laying right next to me. It was probably because I passed out that nothing happened, right? And it was all based on, I don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
Without this, I don't know what is a future, what is life, what is all this. And not only that, now I'm all alone, and nobody gives a shit that I'm right here right now. And I hadn't met anybody on YouTube or anything yet, so I had no support system,
you didn't even have a concept of a support system.
Yeah, like nothing. It was it was me, me and myself, right? And then I'll finish this, and if you want to follow up on anything there, before we go to my favorite topic video of yours, is the one thing you said, and I love that you said it, because Jena knows this, because we have fun with it. But if I'm not like behind my computer, like whether it's YouTube or obviously I love creating music and DJing, if I'm not in my studio doing one of those things, I'm outside as much as I can. I'm outside, even if I'm just sitting on the curb, because I know what happens to me, and I know where I go mentally, especially if there's a lot of stress or anxiety or whatever. If I just lock myself up and I go reclusive and I stay here, all the dark shit happens, right? And I go dark. It's dangerous. So to anybody watching now or you watch later, what Drew said, that is like, do that. Even if it just means you go out on your porch, you go on the sidewalk, just get out of that space.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the most basic, practical, healthy thing that you can do, is remove yourself from that. And as Drew explained, sometimes that is the most difficult and exhausting movement you can make, is just dragging yourself up to go outside.
Yeah.
But when you do it, and once you do get out of that space, it is it's refreshing, and it helps you can try to recenter, so to speak. But no, I appreciate all that you shared, Drew, because that hits home for me, and I know it has to for many others. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before we get to the video, because we've got about 10-15 minutes left here, and I did want to talk about this video. There's no way that I'm going to have you on and not talk about this video. But before we do have a super chat. And Drew, here we have a little super chat music. So
all right,
we do the thing. We do the thing. Thank you to Neil, the 604 Atheist, for 20 Canadian dollars. You both turned out to be great humans, and I'm proud to know you. And same to you, Neil. Love you, brother.
Oh, absolutely right back at you, Neil. Neil is absolutely wonderful. Being in his company is always a total treat.
Yep. Even though he won't admit it, but that's a wig. It's a wig. It's not real hair. But and we have one more. We have one more here. Yeah. wrong button. I don't even know how to say the name, but $10. Thank you for the support. Drew, this is a mod from your Discord, sir. We'd appreciate if you could get in contact with us again. We've been trying to reach you. Oh, and please bring the milk you supposedly left.
Yeah, I went out for cigarettes a few years ago and just never came back. No, I've actually been thinking about getting back into my Discord. I was really active on my Discord several years ago, and it kind of got to the point where my just my following is growing to a point where I was like, I don't want to become the egotistical asshole that many people become when they start to get a following. But at the same time, I don't want to slow down and just like shy away from saying the things I need to say. So that to say, I shied away from a lot of fan interaction for a few years, and now I'm finally kind of being more comfortable with it. Like me being at Better was actually a big thing because I haven't gone to a conference in a while, not just because of COVID, but because I was like, I don't want to be in the limelight for a while because I don't want myself to turn into a complete like prick, like I see that a lot of people do when they start to get more popular. And so, yeah, but appreciate that comment. I'll reach out.
and quickly before we get to the video, I can relate to that. So for those here that are part of our Discord or those that are part of Drew's, it is it's a difficult cocktail to keep that balance and being active and proactive and being a part and making and doing the best you can to be a friend, a humanist, all those things, and caring and also taking care of yourself and giving getting your you time, so to speak, where you're focusing on you and your mental health and your wellness. So it's a tough bag, but I can tell you we do our best. But the last thing I want to talk about, Drew, I'd love to talk about several other things that we talked about, but we're not ending the stream until I talk about this video. So you did a video on emotional priming when it comes to praise and worship and that sort of thing in the evangelical church. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched that, because it is literally like reliving my entire childhood and my teenage years, right? Yeah. Because not only did I grow up, but my mom was the one directing it all. She was the composer and the leader, and it wasn't until after I got out of church and started to learn that not only is this intentional, it's fucking taught. They teach these folks that, okay, when we start out, we're going to hit, and for those that are musicians, you'll know what I mean. We're going to start out with major chords, and they're going to be high energy chords, right? And it's going to get everybody pumped up. And good morning, everybody. We're here to praise Jesus. And then after 2, maybe 3 songs, depending on how long it goes, then we go to the minor chords, the more melancholy, melodic sounding chords. Now we're going to hit the feels, right? And then I'll kind of let you take it from there, Drew. But we've actually on our channel we've reviewed that twice. I did it once on my own and once with Eve was framed from TikTok because she's a former praise and worship pastor, and we covered it because you fucking that video, you fucking killed it. And anybody that ever has questions about that and the psychology behind that, I always refer them to that video. But so yeah, the priming, give us a quick review on that, and in your view on that now versus when you were in church.
Yeah, I mean, so actually when I was a kid, I was taught, I was in an independent fundamental Baptist church, so we did not have charismatic services at all. It was very, very straight-laced. We only sang out of the hymn book, and we did not have drums. We did not have guitars. It was like piano and our voices, and that's an emotional thing, yes. But we talked quite a bit about that, contemporary Christian music that is like the rock and roll that is not from God. That is something that people do in order to make you feel a certain way so that they can teach you unsound Christian doctrine. And so I was a Christian and I believed all that stuff. Like, oh yeah, if you go to like a Pentecostal church, they sing and dance and speak in tongues and do all the music and stuff. They do that in order to get you emotionally in the space that they need you to be in so that they can teach you lies about the Bible. And so like that totally was all there when I was a Christian. Then I went to my Christian college that was not independent fundamental Baptist, very conservative, but they did sometimes use drums and they played electric guitar. And I mean, it wasn't, people were not like dancing around and stuff. Sometimes like people raised their hands up and that was the most of it. It wasn't charismatic still. It just was, it was normal like Christian worship music. You know, we played Hillsong stuff. And I always felt so uncomfortable in those services, even as a Christian, because I was like, they're just manipulating us. Like this is all they're doing. They are, you know, playing really hyped sounding music when they want us hyped. They're playing sad sounding music when they want us to reflect and be sad. That's what all this is. They're just getting us in the place with music and with repetitive rituals and things so that we'll be in the right headspace for them to say what they want to say, and we'll be more likely to accept it, not because it's actually like we should accept it because it's a logical argument or because it's reasonable or whatever, but just because we feel like we should. And it finally came around when I was in my last semester of college that, that's actually what all like musical ritual does.
Absolutely.
It didn't matter whether we were singing out of a hymn book or whether we had drums and guitars. It was the same thing, and it was for the same purpose.
Absolutely.
And so it just hit me like, wow, how many things have I accepted in my life because I was told that if you feel anything, if you feel these emotions while you're engaging with the music, that is not the music. That's God. If you feel it, it is God. It's the music leaders cannot make you feel that way. Only God could ever make you feel that way. Only God could ever give you goosebumps, as long as you're in our church. Other churches, not so much. Our church, though, yeah, that's how it works at our church. And like, I'm just like, half of the things that I believe are all based on me going into a space where I feel very safe, where I know everyone, where I love everyone, and then getting into a certain emotional space because of the music, thinking that God is influencing me to think something or make a decision or rededicate my life. And really, it's just the music the whole time.
Yeah.
And not just the music, but also the ritual of being around. Like, I mean, I went to a church that had about 500 people in the Sunday services. So you're a part of this crowd. You stand up when they tell you to stand up. You sit down when they tell you to stand or to sit down. You read this text out loud with everyone when they tell you to. That is a way, I mean, I learned about this studying for my psychology major, that doesn't matter if there's music or not, being in a crowd and acting in unison with a crowd, whether someone is invoking God or the spiritual or not, even if it's just a football game, that gets you in the headspace to act more like them and to think more like them.
The mom mentality, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just groupthink. And there are literal physical motions. There are physical acts that you can do that get you into that. And that's what church is. Yeah. Like church, the reason why people don't leave the faith when they're going to church all the time is not just because they go there and they're like, my spirit is edified and I'm not getting tempted by other things. It's because you're going there and you're being just subtly or not so subtly, maybe in your case with like the big charismatic productions, conditioned to think what they want you to think and to feel the way they want you to feel. And there's nothing I tried to say in that video, which literally there's been a bunch of responses from Christians. Not a single one has ever thought that I said this in the video. They don't like acknowledge this. I don't think that ritual or music are bad. Music is going to get you in your feelings. It's going to make you think differently. That's the point. I mean, like, musical artists will express things through music because they want to convince you of something or make you think something they couldn't if they just were talking to you. And like, that's valid. You can do that. The thing is, and like, it's the same thing with ritual. Like, ritual can make you feel certain ways, and that's fine. Ritual is not a problem. The problem is what I was saying earlier. When you engage in that stuff, they tell you that's God and it can't be us. Whereas, I mean, if you're getting really in your feelings listening to like a Bon Iver song, it's like, he would never say God is touching you and making you think that. He's like, I'm glad that my artistic creation influenced you.
Yeah.
He's just being honest about what it is. I mean, it is informed consent within the church when it comes to ritual does not exist. And they don't think that it should exist because the only thing that's influencing you is God. It's not other people, and you do not have to give God consent. God can do whatever he wants with you at any point. He could brought you into this world, he can take you out, just like your mom said. You know? So yeah, it basically it's a complete breakdown to where you can point this stuff out, and like the Christians that are responded to it are like, well, Drew engages in ritual. Look, he says the same thing at the end of every one of his videos. So he's just contradicting himself. And I'm like, yeah, but I do rituals. I play music. I want to influence you. Yes, like that video was called like church services are designed to influence you. Here's how. And people were like, GM Skeptic videos are designed to influence you. Here's how. And they're like, you contradict yourself. Yeah, I admit that I'm trying to influence you. And I am acknowledging that I am a flawed human being who has limitations. And if you feel something by what I said, that does not mean that you have to completely accept everything I said because you had certain feelings. I am not divinely authoritative. You can question everything that I say, and I admit that I am trying to influence you. That is not something that church services will ever, they will not acknowledge that. I mean, in fact, there were music leaders that were saying, yes, we do try to facilitate a spirit of reflection, but it's impossible for us to make someone feel that. We play the music and then it's God acting and doing whatever he wants. And I'm like, no, you are lying. You are perfectly capable of making someone feel what you want them to feel. If you're honest, you will say that you are capable of doing that. Other religions that you don't believe in use music to influence people. And you don't think that that's God. What do you think it is then? It's human beings. Admit what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Be honest about it. You are putting yourself on a pedestal with God himself and then saying that you're so humble that you would never say that you're doing that. It is when you have lived this experience, you've been to literally hundreds, if not thousands of services like that. And then it finally clicks that all this stuff has been emotional. Like they've been meaning to get you into this emotional space the whole time. You're like, oh my God, half of my lived experiences were a lie. And that's a really hard thing to admit when you are someone that is basically facilitating that as a music leader.
Yeah, and I want to make one more point before we wrap up. Before we do, we have a interesting super chat here. And what's up, Pat Lowinger? Mad Facts with Pat. Thank you, Pat. $2, 2 times. Tang Gang, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Nope, we only drink Tang around here.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't no Kool-Aid around here. That's for that Thomas guy. He does the Kool-Aid. We do the Tang here. Thank you, Pat. And yeah, the last thing I'll say before we wrap it up alongside of that is well, I've been to many concerts because I've been in several bands. I was in a hip hop group for a long time. So I've either performed or attended many concerts. And it's funny because once I was an atheist. I remember the first time it hit me at a concert, and it was the first time like I had this like revelation. Drew, I had a revelation. I had like these badass seats at a Post Malone concert, and I'm a huge Post fan. And like I'm there, I'm digging it. Like it's just a badass conference. All of a sudden, it was like I forgot what conference I was at, and it may even just been for a second or two, but it felt like it was like 10 minutes. And I looked around me, and all of these memories started flooding my brain of going to like Acquire the Fire and all these other like youth-based like concert type feeling youth conferences or meetings, whatever. And I was like, hold on. This is fucking crazy. This is fucking crazy. And I still have pictures on my phone because I was looking around and all these people have their hands up at a Post Malone concert. All these people have their hands up. There's the fog machine. There's the lights. There's the kick drum. And I'm like, hold on. This is exactly what I felt. This is exactly what I felt at church. Like I feel the adrenaline. I feel the energy in the room. And again, the herd or the mob mentality where it's like all of us are digging this. Mm-hmm. All of us are feeling this. Why? Because that's what the fuck music does, man.
Right.
It's art. It hits you in your feels. And especially if there's, lyrically speaking, if you can connect to what whoever penned the lyrics, if you can connect to that, you dive even deeper into the song, right?
Yeah.
And you feel more of the energy and more of the rush. And you may even have, as my mom would say, Holy Spirit goosebumps, right? Where you're just feeling the spirit. But no, all it is that's you as a human reacting and responding to things that hit you a certain way in your goddamn brain, Drew. In your goddamn brain.
And you'll leave that Post Malone concert thinking like, wow, I had this great experience. Like, I feel like I almost had an out-of-body experience. I felt so bonded with these other people. I feel so inspired. I'm going to go out and I'm going to live my life better. And, like I'm going to, whatever, like you may try to improve your life. You'll take something from that experience. But pretty much everyone will be like, that music really hit me. And hanging out with my friends that were there really hit me. And that's what influenced my decision. And I mean, Christians will do that when they go to secular concerts. And like it, fine. Like there's no problem with that. I think it's healthy to have those experiences. But when you refuse to acknowledge that, like when you get goosebumps and you're in church and you're like, oh no, that was the Holy Spirit, that could not have been the music. It's like, well, I don't really think that you're considering everything that's in play here. I think that you need to be consistent and realize that, yeah, like you're saying, this is what music does. And they should not be up there telling you that it's impossible for you to feel that feeling unless it's God.
Oh man, Drew, we should plan a stream sometime where we just talk about this, because I could talk for hours about it, because I grew up around it, right? And I remember, like with my mom produced, was it 2 or 3? She wrote and produced and released 2 or 3 Christian contemporary albums. Like I lived and breathed all of this shit, and now being on the other side of it, like it is one of my favorite things to talk about. So, but I want to respect your time, so I'm not going to keep going because I'm long winded, and if I keep going, then it just unravels from there. So before we wrap up the stream, I do want to say again, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I appreciate it. I hope everybody in the chat that you enjoyed the conversation. And again, if you haven't, the link has been put in the chat many times now at this point. But Drew, is there anything you have coming up that you want everybody to know about? And I will shamelessly plug one for you that I just watched within the last 3 or 4 days. He has Drew has an interview with Bart Ehrman, and it's awesome. It's an awesome interview, awesome conversation. So by all means, go check that out. But anything else, I won't steal your thunder.
Yeah, I like teasing my next video when I go on live stuff. So, my God, I've been working on. It took me 2 weeks, like 10 days, I think, of writing to finish it. But I am releasing about an hour-long response to a Ben Shapiro video about atheism, where he kind of goes in with the guise of rebutting certain atheist arguments, but the point of it becomes atheists are evil and predatory, and they're killers. And so you shouldn't be an atheist because it makes you a horrible person who does all this stuff, and society will collapse if we're all atheists. So I'm going through and responding to every single claim he makes in the entire video, which if you've ever listened to any Ben Shapiro, you know he makes a claim about every like 4 to 5 seconds. So that's why it took me 2 weeks to write the thing. But yeah, it's the video that I'm responding to is 10 minutes long, and my response is like 50 minutes long. So yeah, hour-long response video. Also, I'm featuring a special guest. I'll just tease that. I won't say who it is, but there's a content creator who I thought could rebut an argument better than I could, and so I brought him on. So Drew and guest rebut Ben Shapiro for an hour is the next one.
Oh, so you got it first here on Tang Gang. There's the appetizer. There's a special guest. But before we do wrap up, we I think it's one more. Yep, one more. Yeah, they're called super chats. Oz, use words, speak. Thank you, Cray 199. Oz Eve should join that discussion. Absolutely, because she helped me review it. I think it was the second time I did it. And she has her own unique insight, being a former now praise and worship pastor. So
yeah, I bet. Yeah.
If we could do something like that would be a lot of badassery. Before we wrap it up, Drew, I always like to say, is there any final words, thoughts, life-changing quotes, anything like that you would like to share with anyone before we dip out?
I'll just leave you with the cliche of, if you want there to be some change, then be that change the best you can, and other people will follow your example. I think Oz is a good example of that.
And I appreciate that. And everybody in the chat, again, love y'all, appreciate y'all. And I'll jump in the Discord here for I know I say a half hour, ends and be an hour, 2 hours, but I'll jump in there for a few minutes. See you there if you want to jump in. But again, thank you, Drew. Thank you, everybody. Love y'all. Peace out.